I stood on my own porch that cold October morning, staring at a door that wouldn't open. My key, the same one I'd used for 43 years, turned uselessly in a lock that didn't recognize me anymore. My hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. When the door finally opened, it wasn't my daughter standing there. It was him, Thomas Fairley, my son-in-law, wearing that snake oil smile that had fooled everyone but me. He leaned against the doorframe like he owned the place, because apparently he did. "Eleanor," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Didn't Lorraine tell you? We've sold the place." I thought I'd misheard him. I had to have. This was my home. The house my Henry built with his own two hands, the walls we painted together on hot summer afternoons, the kitchen where I'd taught Lorraine to make her grandmother's apple pie. The floorboards still creaked in the same spots. The rose bushes I'd planted when Lorraine was born were blooming just last week. "What are you talking about?" I heard myself say, but my voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. Thomas pulled an envelope from his back pocket, unfolded it with deliberate slowness, and held it up like a trophy. Legal papers. My daughter's signature at the bottom, right next to his. My house sold. Without a word to me. Without a conversation. Without even the decency of a warning. "You're getting older, Eleanor," he said, and I swear there was satisfaction in his eyes. "Your memory's been slipping." Lorraine and I both agreed. It's time you moved somewhere safer. Somewhere with people who can look after you properly. My memory wasn't slipping. I could tell you the exact day Henry proposed. June 14th, 1968, under a maple tree that's probably still standing in the town square. I could recite every birthday, every Christmas morning, every scraped knee and bedtime story from Lorraine's childhood. My mind was sharp as ever, and Thomas knew it. But that didn't matter to him. "Where's Lorraine?" I asked, my voice steadier now, anger starting to burn through the shock. She appeared then, stepping out from behind him like a ghost. My baby girl. 52 years old now, but still my daughter. Her eyes were red and puffy, but she wouldn't look at me. She studied the porch boards, the doorframe, anywhere but my face. "Mom," she whispered, "please don't make this harder. Tom says it's best." Tom says it's best. Those 4 words hit me harder than the locked door, harder than the legal papers, harder than anything. Because in that moment, I realized I'd already lost her. My daughter. The girl I'd carried for 9 months, raised for decades, protected and loved with everything I had, was speaking someone else's words. The smell of cedar still lingered faintly in the air. Henry's cedar. He'd lined the porch ceiling with it himself, said it would keep the wasps away and make the evenings smell like home. I could almost feel him standing beside me, his rough carpenter's hands on my shoulders, giving me strength. But Henry was gone. And now, so was everything we'd built together. Thomas handed me a business card for Pine Grove Assisted Living, some sterile facility 30 miles away where old people went to be forgotten. "They're expecting you this afternoon," he said. "We've already moved your essentials. It's all been arranged." Arranged. Like I was a piece of furniture. Like 43 years of memories could be packed into a few boxes labeled essentials. I looked at Lorraine one more time, hoping, praying, she'd remember who she was, who we were. But she just stood there, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, letting her husband erase me from my own life. I took the business card. I took the envelope. And I walked down those porch steps for what I thought would be the last time. That was the day I died, not in body, but in spirit. But they should have known one thing about me. I don't stay buried for long. If you believe no one deserves to be betrayed by their own family, hit that like button. Let's see how this quiet old woman found her justice. Have you ever trusted someone who later broke your heart? Tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone else heal. Before Thomas Fairley ever existed in our lives, Before the locks changed and the betrayal cut deep, there was love. Real love. The kind that builds things instead of tearing them down. I was born in a town so small you could walk from one end to the other in 15 minutes. My father was a carpenter, not the fancy kind who builds mansions, but the kind who fixed broken chairs and patched rotting porches for families who couldn't afford to pay much. He'd come home with sawdust in his hair and splinters in his fingers, but he never complained. Not once. My mother was different. Softer. She mended clothes for neighbors and listened to their troubles over cups of weak coffee. Our front door was always open, and someone was always crying at our kitchen table. She'd hold their hands and say, "Honey, this too shall pass." And somehow, when she said it, you believed her. They taught me that honesty was everything, that your word was your bond, that you treated people right, even when they didn't deserve it, because that's what separated good folks from bad ones. I met Henry Whitford at a church social when I was 23. He wasn't much to look at, tall and gangly, with hands too rough for a man his age, and a smile that came slow but stayed long. He asked me to dance, and I said yes, even though he stepped on my toes twice. We were married 6 months later in that same church, with 2 wedding bands we'd saved up for and a borrowed truck that barely made it to the reception. We didn't have a honeymoon. We didn't have furniture. We didn't even have a proper house. But we had each other, and back then, that felt like enough. Henry was a builder by trade, and he had this dream of making something that would last. "Eleanor," he'd say, "I don't want to just fix other people's houses. I want to build ours. Something we can pass down. Something that means something." So we did. We bought a small plot of land on the edge of town, nothing fancy, just dirt and weeds and possibility. Henry drew up plans on the back of napkins. We saved every penny. And slowly, board by board, nail by nail, we built our home. I remember the day we painted the kitchen yellow. Henry said it would make the mornings feel warmer. I told him he was being silly, but he was right. Every morning after that, when the sun came through those windows, it felt like hope lived in that room. We planted trees in the yard, maples and oaks that were just saplings then. Henry said they'd outlive us both. Someday, he told me, our grandkids will climb these trees and remember us. Lorraine was born 3 years into our marriage. A firecracker from day one. Loud, stubborn, full of life. She had Henry's smile and my temper, which made for some interesting years. But God, we loved her. We loved her so much it hurt sometimes. That house became our whole world. It was where Lorraine took her first steps, where she lost her first tooth, where she cried over her first heartbreak. It was where Henry taught her to hammer nails straight, and where I taught her to bake bread from scratch. Every wall held a memory. Every floorboard told a story. The creak on the 3rd step from the top, that was from the time Lorraine tried to sneak out as a teenager, and Henry caught her. The stain on the living room floor, that was from when I dropped a whole pot of spaghetti sauce during Christmas dinner, and we all laughed so hard we cried. Henry used to say that houses weren't made of wood and nails. They were made of moments. And our house was full of them. But life doesn't let you keep the good things forever. It tests you. It takes from you. And it doesn't ask permission. Henry died when Lorraine was 34. A heart attack. Sudden. Pull. One morning he was drinking coffee and reading the paper, and by afternoon he was gone. The silence that followed was unbearable. The house felt too big without him. The rooms echoed. The mornings didn't feel warm anymore, even with the yellow kitchen walls. Lorraine was there for me at first. She called every day. She visited on weekends. She held my hand when I couldn't stop crying and reminded me that Henry would want me to keep going. But time changes people. Her visits got shorter. Her calls got less frequent. She started a new job, made new friends, built a new life that didn't have much room for her grieving mother. I understood. I really did. She had to live her own life. But understanding doesn't make loneliness hurt any less. And then, 5 years after Henry passed, she called me with news. She'd met someone. His name was Thomas Fairley, and she sounded happier than she'd been in years. I wanted to be happy for her. I wanted to believe that she'd found what Henry and I had, someone to build a life with, someone who'd treat her right. But when I met Thomas for the first time, something felt wrong. His handshake was too firm. His smile was too practiced. And his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, never matched the warmth in his voice. I tried to ignore it. I tried to give him a chance, the way my parents taught me. But deep down, I knew. I knew he wasn't right. I thought love built houses. I didn't know greed could burn them down. Have you ever had a bad feeling about someone that turned out to be right? Drop a comment and let me know, because sometimes our instincts know things our hearts don't want to accept. Don't forget to subscribe if you're invested in this story, because what happens next will show you exactly why I should have trusted my gut. Thomas Fairley entered our lives like a storm nobody saw coming. Lorraine met him at some work conference in Boston, one of those networking events where people pretend to care about business while really just looking for connections. He was younger than her by 4 years, which didn't bother me. Age is just a number when the person's heart is in the right place. But Thomas's heart wasn't in the right place. I knew it from that first dinner. Lorraine brought him to the house on a Sunday afternoon in late spring. The roses were blooming, and I'd made pot roast, Henry's favorite. I wanted everything to be perfect for her. She deserved happiness after everything she'd been through. Thomas walked in wearing an expensive suit that didn't match the casual family dinner Lorraine had described. He shook my hand and called me Mrs. Whitford, in this formal way that felt practiced. His cologne was too strong. His smile was too wide. "Beautiful home," he said, looking around like he was appraising it. "Must be worth quite a bit now, with the market the way it is." Not "what a lovely home," or "I can feel the love here." Just worth quite a bit. Lorraine laughed nervously and squeezed his arm. "Tom's in real estate development," she explained. "He can't help seeing everything as an investment." But I saw the way he looked at my house. Not like a home, like an opportunity. During dinner, he dominated every conversation. When I talked about Henry's carpentry work, Thomas interrupted to explain how modern construction was more efficient. When Lorraine mentioned her job, he corrected her terminology. When I offered dessert, he patted his stomach and said he was watching his figure, then looked at Lorraine like she should be doing the same. Little things, small moments, but they added up. After they left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I called Lorraine the next day, trying to be casual about it. "He seems nice," I lied. "How long have you two been together?" 8 months, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Mom, I think he might be the one. He's so confident and successful. He makes me feel safe." Safe. That word stuck with me. Because the kind of safe Thomas offered wasn't protection, it was control. Over the next few months, he became a constant presence. Every time Lorraine visited, Thomas was with her. Every phone call, he was in the background. Every decision she made, she ran by him first. He started managing her finances to help her save better. He convinced her to quit her job and work for his development company so they could spend more time together. He slowly, methodically, cut away every part of her independence until she didn't even notice it was gone. And he started making comments about me, about my age, about living alone, about how difficult it must be to maintain such a big house at 75. "You know, Eleanor," he said one evening while Lorraine was in the bathroom, "there are some really nice senior communities around here. Places where you wouldn't have to worry about yard work or repairs. Where you'd have people around. Have you ever thought about downsizing?" I smiled politely and changed the subject. But inside, alarm bells were ringing. He wasn't concerned about me. He was concerned about what I had. The shift happened gradually. Lorraine stopped asking me how I was doing and started telling me what I should be doing. "Mom, Tom thinks you should get your hearing checked." "Mom, Tom says you shouldn't be driving at night anymore." "Mom, Tom noticed you repeated yourself last week. Maybe we should talk to a doctor. Tom thinks. Tom says. Tom noticed. My daughter's voice, but his words. I tried talking to her about it once. We were having lunch, just the two of us, and I said, "Honey, do you ever feel like Thomas makes decisions for you instead of with you?" Her face went hard. That's not fair, Mom.
He cares about me.
About us. He's just trying to help. But are you happy? I pressed. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and said, "I'll call you later." She didn't call for 2 weeks. That's when I knew I'd lost her. Not to death or distance, but to manipulation so subtle she couldn't even see it happening. Thomas started showing up at my house when Lorraine wasn't there. "Just checking on you," he'd say. But he'd walk through rooms, opening drawers, looking at documents. Once, I caught him in Henry's old office, going through the desk. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't even look embarrassed. "Lorraine asked me to look for some old tax papers. She's worried you might have missed something important." I hadn't asked for help. Lorraine hadn't mentioned taxes. But he said it with such confidence that for a moment, I doubted myself. That's what manipulators do. They make you question your own reality. I started locking my bedroom door at night. I started hiding important documents in places he wouldn't think to look. And I started paying attention to every word, every glance, every moment when his mask slipped just a little. One evening, I was washing dishes when I overheard him on the phone in the living room. He thought I couldn't hear him, but the acoustics in that old house carried sound better than he realized. "Yeah, it's a prime property," he said. "Once we move her out, we can flip it for at least $400,000. Maybe more if we renovate. The old lady won't know the difference. Lorraine's already on board with the assisted living idea." My hands froze in the soapy water. The plate I was holding slipped and cracked against the sink. He appeared in the doorway a second later. All fake concern. "You okay, Eleanor? You need to be more careful." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw exactly what he was. A predator. A con man. A snake who'd coiled himself around my daughter and was now coming for everything Henry and I had built. I saw the snake coiling, but my daughter called it love. If you've ever tried to warn someone about a toxic person and they didn't listen, hit that like button. Subscribe if you're still with me, because this story's just getting started and Thomas Fairley has no idea who he's messing with. It was October 15th, a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I'd spent the night before at my friend Dorothy's house, helping her sort through her late husband's belongings. We talked until midnight, sharing stories about the men we'd loved and lost, finding comfort in someone who understood what grief felt like. I drove home around 10 in the morning, tired but peaceful. The fall air was crisp, and the trees along my street were blazing with red and gold. I thought about raking the leaves that afternoon, maybe making soup for dinner. I pulled into my driveway and noticed immediately that something was different. The porch light was new, some modern fixture that didn't match the house at all. The flower pots I'd arranged by the front door were gone. Even the welcome mat was missing. My stomach tightened, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe Lorraine had stopped by to help with some repairs. I walked up the porch steps, Henry's steps, and pulled out my key. The one I'd carried for 43 years. The one that opened every lock in this house. I slid it into the lock. It didn't fit.
Not like it was stuck or jammed.
It literally didn't fit. The lock had been changed. I tried again, thinking maybe I was using the wrong key. But no. This was my house key. I'd used it yesterday morning before leaving for Dorothy's. Panic started rising in my chest. I rang the doorbell.
Knocked.
Rang again. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Finally, the door opened. Thomas stood there in jeans and a t-shirt, looking completely at ease. Like he belonged there, and I didn't. "Eleanor," he said, not moving from the doorway. "Didn't Lorraine tell you? We've sold the place." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. "What are you talking about? This is my house." He reached behind him and pulled out an envelope, legal papers with official stamps and signatures. He unfolded them slowly, deliberately, like he was enjoying this. Actually, the house was in Lorraine's name. Remember when you transferred the deed 5 years ago for estate planning purposes? Your lawyer suggested it to avoid probate complications when you pass. I did remember. After Henry died, the lawyer said it would make things easier for Lorraine someday. I trusted her. She was my daughter. Why wouldn't I? That doesn't give you the right to sell it without telling me, I said, my voice shaking. I live here. This is my home. Thomas's fake sympathy was worse than outright cruelty. Eleanor, we need to talk about your memory. You've been having episodes, forgetting things, repeating yourself. Lorraine and I have been worried sick. My memory is fine. Is it? Because you forgot we were coming by yesterday. You left the stove on 3 times last month. You called Lorraine Lucy last week, and you don't even know anyone named Lucy. None of that was true. Not one word. But he said it with such conviction that for a split second, I wondered if I was losing my mind. Then Lorraine appeared behind him. My daughter. My baby girl. The child I'd rocked to sleep 1,000 nights. The girl I'd bandaged and comforted and loved more than my own life. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes, but she didn't move toward me. She didn't tell Thomas to stop. She just stood there, wringing her hands. Mom, she whispered, please don't make this harder. Tom says it's best. Tom says it's best. Those words broke something inside me that I didn't know could break, because they proved that I'd already lost her. The manipulation was complete. Lorraine, I said, my voice barely working. This is the house your father built. He built it for us. For our family. You're just going to let him sell it. She flinched but didn't answer. Thomas stepped forward, closing the space between us. We've arranged a place for you at Pine Grove Assisted Living. It's a beautiful facility, much safer than trying to manage this big house alone. They have activities, medical staff, everything you need. I don't need anything except my own home. You're not thinking clearly, he said, and there was steel under the sympathy now. This is what's best for everyone. The house is already under contract. The buyers take possession next month. Your belongings have been moved to storage except for what we sent to Pine Grove. I looked past him into my own living room. Half the furniture was gone. The family photos on the walls, gone. Henry's reading chair, gone. They'd erased 43 years like it meant nothing. You can't do this, I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. Thomas handed me a business card and a manila envelope. Your room is ready. Here's the address and your intake paperwork. Someone will be expecting you this afternoon. We've already paid the first 3 months. I took the papers with numb fingers. Behind Thomas, Lorraine finally met my eyes, and I saw something there, guilt, maybe, or regret, but not enough to make her stop this. Not enough to choose her mother over the man who'd reprogrammed her. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered, but you'll be safer there. You'll see. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until she woke up from whatever spell Thomas had cast. But I didn't. Because sometimes the cruelest thing you can do is nothing at all. I turned around and walked down those porch steps, my legs moving on autopilot. Behind me, I heard the door close. Heard the new lock click into place. I made it to my car, got in, and just sat there. The steering wheel was cold under my hands. The morning sun was too bright. Everything felt wrong, like I'd woken up in someone else's nightmare. I looked back at the house one more time. My house. Henry's house. The place where we'd built our life together, where we'd raised our daughter, where every board and nail held a piece of our story. And now it belonged to strangers. I started the car and drove away, watching my home disappear in the rearview mirror. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there, standing on that porch like a beggar at my own door. The assisted living facility address was printed on the business card. Pine Grove. like naming it something peaceful would make it any less of a prison. I drove there because I didn't know what else to do. Because I was 75 years old and suddenly homeless. Because my daughter had chosen a con man over her own mother. Because sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who destroy you. But even as my world crumbled around me, even as everything Henry and I had built turned to ashes, a small voice inside me whispered, "Not yet. Would you fight back if someone stole your home, or would you walk away? Let me know below. And if you're feeling what Eleanor's feeling right now, that rage mixed with heartbreak, drop a comment saying justice because she's about to need it. Stay with me for the next part. Pine Grove Assisted Living wasn't a grove, and it sure as hell wasn't living. It was a warehouse for old people nobody wanted anymore. Clean, sure. Organized, yes. But sterile as a hospital and twice as depressing. My room was on the second floor, number 214. A single bed with white sheets. A dresser. A plastic chair by the window. One closet that barely fit the few clothes Thomas had bothered to pack for me. No pictures on the walls. No personality. No soul. This was supposed to be my home now. This box that smelled like industrial cleaner and someone else's sadness. The first night, I didn't sleep. I sat in that plastic chair and stared out the window at the parking lot, watching the lights flicker, counting cars, doing anything to avoid thinking about what had just happened. But by morning, reality had settled in like a weight on my chest. I'd lost everything. My home. My daughter. My dignity. The facility ran on a schedule tighter than a prison. Breakfast at 7. Morning activities at 9. Lunch at noon. Afternoon activities at 2. Dinner at 5. Lights out at 9. Nobody asked what I wanted. Nobody cared that I'd lived 75 years making my own decisions. Here I was just another old lady who needed managing. The nurses were polite but distant. They called me sweetie and Han like I was a child. They spoke slowly, enunciating every word, assuming I was deaf or slow or both. When I tried to explain that I didn't belong there, that there'd been a mistake, they patted my hand and said, "I know, sweetie. It's hard at first." Hard didn't begin to cover it. The other residents were mostly folks who actually needed full-time care. People with dementia who forgot their own names. People in wheelchairs who couldn't feed themselves. People who stared at walls and waited to die. I wasn't like them. My mind was sharp. My body was strong. But none of that mattered because the paperwork said I belonged there, and paperwork was all anyone cared about. I called Lorraine 3 times that first week. She answered once. "Mom, I can't talk right now. I'm at work." "Lorraine, please. You have to get me out of here. This place isn't right for me." Silence on the other end. Then, "Tom says you need time to adjust. Give it a chance, okay? I'll visit soon." She didn't visit. Thomas visited once, 2 weeks in. He showed up with flowers, cheap grocery store carnations, and that same fake smile. "How are we doing, Eleanor?" "Getting settled."
We.
Like he had any right to include himself in my experience. "I want to go home," I said flatly. "This is your home now. The house sold yesterday, actually. Nice young couple with 2 kids. They're going to love it." He said it to hurt me, and it worked. My home, Henry's home, belonged to strangers now. Some family would make memories in my kitchen. Some kids would climb the trees Henry planted. And I was stuck here, rotting away in a plastic chair. "You did this on purpose," I said quietly. "You manipulated my daughter and stole my house." Thomas leaned close, and for the first time, the mask dropped completely. His voice went cold. "I gave your daughter a better life. She was wasting her time worrying about you when she should have been focused on us. You were in the way, Eleanor. And now you're not." He left 10 minutes later, after signing the visitor log and waving cheerfully at the nurses like he was Father of the Year. I sat there, trembling with rage and helplessness. Because what could I do? I had no money, no power, no way out. Or so I thought. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I paced my tiny room, thinking about Henry. He'd always been so careful, so prepared. Eleanor, he used to say, life comes at you fast. You gotta have a backup plan. And then I remembered something. Something I hadn't thought about in years. After Henry died, his lawyer helped me organize all our accounts. But Henry had been paranoid about putting everything in one place. He'd kept a secondary account under my maiden name, Eleanor Parker, from his days doing independent contracting work. It was supposed to be for emergencies, for taxes, for unexpected expenses. We'd barely touched it. I'd forgotten it even existed. I went to the facility's small business center the next morning, where residents could use a computer. My hands were shaking as I logged into the old bank's website using credentials I'd scribbled in an ancient address book. The account was still there, and it had grown. Years of accumulated interest, forgotten dividend payments, automatic deposits from a rental property Henry had owned briefly. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. $63,000. Enough to rent an apartment. Enough to hire a lawyer. Enough to disappear if I needed to. For the first time in 2 months, I felt something besides despair. I felt possibility. I started planning that very day. I couldn't just walk out. They'd send authorities after me, claim I was a danger to myself. But I could be discharged if I proved I had somewhere safe to go and someone to help me. I called Dorothy, my oldest friend. I need a favor, I said. A big one. She didn't even hesitate. Whatever you need. Within a week, I had a plan. Dorothy would come pick me up for a day visit, which the facility allowed. We'd drive to the next town over, where I'd rented a small apartment under my maiden name. I'd take only what I needed and disappear into my old life under a new identity. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was confused. They thought I'd just fade away quietly. But I'd spent 75 years surviving things that should have broken me. I'd buried the love of my life and kept going. I'd raised a daughter alone. I'd built homes with my bare hands. I wasn't dying in Pine Grove assisted living. The morning of my escape, I woke before dawn. I packed a small bag with clothes, documents, and the one photo I'd managed to keep, me and Henry on our wedding day, young and stupid and happy. Dorothy pulled up at 9, right on schedule. The nurses barely glanced at us. Old ladies taking day trips were common enough. As we drove away, I looked back at Pine Grove one last time. 2 months of my life, wasted in that place. But it hadn't broken me. Nothing could break me anymore. Where to? Dorothy asked. Somewhere they'll never think to look, I said. Somewhere I can figure out my next move. Because Thomas and Lorraine thought this was over. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. I didn't know how yet. I didn't have all the pieces. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was going to rise. And when I did, they were going to fall. If you've ever felt underestimated, give this video a thumbs up. This next part will make you believe in quiet strength again. Comment rise if you're ready to see Eleanor come back swinging. Subscribe and turn on notifications because what she does next is going to shock you. The apartment I rented was nothing like my old home, and that was exactly the point. A one-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a building in Westfield, 40 miles from everything I'd known. The landlord barely looked at my ID. Eleanor Parker meant nothing to him. Just another senior citizen looking for a quiet place to live out her days. If only he knew. I paid 6 months up front in cash, which raised no questions. The furniture was minimal, a couch from a thrift store, a table with 2 chairs, a bed that creaked when I sat on it. The walls were beige and blank. No memories here. No ghosts. Just space to think and plan. Dorothy helped me settle in, though I could see the worry in her eyes. Eleanor, are you sure about this? What if they come looking for you? Let them look, I said. Eleanor Whitford is exactly where they left her, broken and forgotten. But Eleanor Parker? She's just getting started. The first thing I did was buy a laptop. Nothing fancy, just enough to do research. The second thing I did was start digging into Thomas Fairley's life. If he'd stolen from me, chances were good I wasn't his first victim. I was right. His social media was a carefully curated performance. Photos of him and Lorraine at expensive restaurants, posts about his thriving business, quotes about success and ambition. But social media is just the highlight reel. The truth lives in the details people try to hide. I spent hours searching public records, business filings, court documents. Thomas had started Fairley Renovations 3 years ago, right around the time he met Lorraine. The company did residential remodeling, flipping houses mostly, and on paper it looked legitimate. But I kept digging. I found complaints on contractor review sites, clients who'd paid deposits and never seen completed work, people who'd hired him for kitchen remodels and ended up with code violations. One woman wrote that Thomas had charged her $12,000 for materials he never bought, then disappeared when she threatened legal action. The complaints were scattered across different sites, easy to miss unless you were looking. But together, they painted a clear picture. Thomas Fairley was a con man who'd learned to stay just below the radar. Until now. I printed everything, made notes, started building a file that would have made Henry proud. My husband always said the best revenge wasn't loud or flashy. It was thorough. But I needed more than internet research. I needed someone who knew how to find the dirt that didn't show up online. Someone who understood that justice sometimes required getting your hands dirty. That's when I found Conrad Mills. His ad was simple. Private investigator. Discreet. Thorough. No case too small. His office was above a dry cleaner in Springfield, and when I walked in, he looked exactly like I'd hoped, gray-haired, weathered, with eyes that had seen enough of the world to know when someone was lying. "Mrs. Parker," he said, gesturing to a worn leather chair across from his desk. "What can I do for you?" I told him everything. Not the sanitized version, but the real story. Thomas, Lorraine, the house, the facility, all of it. I laid out the documents I'd gathered and watched his face as he read through them. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me. "You want revenge." "I want justice," I corrected. "Same thing sometimes." He tapped the documents. "This guy's a piece of work. Classic con artist. Charismatic enough to avoid suspicion, smart enough to cover his tracks. But nobody's perfect. Everyone makes mistakes." "Can you find his?" Conrad smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who believed bad people should face consequences. "Lady, I can find things that'll make him wish he'd never heard your name. But it won't be cheap." "I have money," I said. "And I have time. What I don't have is patience for excuses." He quoted me a retainer fee. I wrote him a check from Eleanor Parker's account without hesitation. "One more thing," I said as I stood to leave. "I need to stay invisible. If Thomas or my daughter find out I'm doing this." "They won't," Conrad interrupted. "That's what you're paying me for." Over the next 3 months, Conrad became my eyes and ears. He followed Thomas, documented his movements, interviewed his clients, dug through trash, and did all the things I couldn't do without being noticed. The reports started coming in weekly, each one more damning than the last. Thomas was cutting corners on every job, using substandard materials, hiring unlicensed contractors, falsifying building permits to avoid inspections. One house he'd renovated had faulty electrical work that could have started a fire. Another had a deck built without proper support beams. It collapsed 2 months after installation, injuring a child. But the worst part? He was charging clients premium prices while pocketing the difference. A $15,000 kitchen remodel would cost him $6,000 in actual work. The rest went into his pocket or into the luxury lifestyle he flaunted online. Conrad also uncovered something I hadn't expected. Thomas had 2 other girlfriends in neighboring towns. Both thought they were in exclusive relationships. Both had lent him money that was never repaid. One had co-signed a loan for equipment that Thomas never bought. He wasn't just a con man. He was a serial con man. And Lorraine was just his latest, most profitable mark. I sat in my bland apartment, reading Conrad's reports by lamplight, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Power. Not the loud, aggressive kind. The quiet, methodical kind. The kind that builds slowly until it becomes unstoppable. Henry used to tell me that the best structures weren't built fast. They were built right. Foundation first. Support beams. Careful planning. And when you finally put the walls up, they'd stand for generations. I was building something now. Not a house, but a case. Not walls, but evidence. And when I was done, Thomas Fairley's entire fraudulent empire would come crashing down around him. I compiled everything into binders, organized by date, by client, by type of fraud. I made copies and stored them in 3 different locations. I created a timeline showing his pattern of behavior. I documented every lie, every shortcut, every person he'd hurt. And then I waited. Because revenge isn't about striking first, it's about striking right. Dorothy visited once a week, bringing groceries and company. "You look different," she said one afternoon, studying my face. "More like yourself." "I am myself," I said. "For the first time in months, I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be." She squeezed my hand. "Henry would be proud of you." Maybe he would. Or maybe he'd tell me I was being reckless. But Henry wasn't here, and I had to make my own choices now.
And I chose justice.
Late one night, I stood at my apartment window looking out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Thomas was sleeping peacefully, thinking he'd gotten away with everything. Thinking Eleanor Whitford was rotting away in some facility, too broken to fight back. He had no idea Eleanor Parker existed. No idea what was coming. No idea that the quiet old lady he discarded was about to become his worst nightmare. I smiled at my reflection in the dark glass. They took my home, but I was about to take their peace. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this old lady flips the game. If you believe karma always finds its way, drop a karma in the comments. What happens next is going to restore your faith in justice. Conrad called me on a Tuesday morning in late March. "I've got something big," he said. "You need to see this in person." I drove to his office, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. 6 months of investigation, and we were finally at the breaking point. I could feel it. When I walked in, Conrad had documents spread across his entire desk, bank statements, invoices, photographs, email printouts. He looked like a man who'd just solved a puzzle that had been bothering him for years. "Sit down," he said, and his tone told me everything I needed to know. He started with the small stuff. Thomas has been running his business on fraudulent permits for over 2 years. I've got documentation of 12 jobs where he forged inspector signatures, for where he used permits from completely different properties. The building department has no record of half the work he claims is up to code. He slid photographs across the desk. Houses with visible electrical hazards. Plumbing that violated basic safety standards. Structural work that wouldn't pass even the most lenient inspection. Any one of these violations could shut him down, Conrad continued. But together, he's looking at criminal charges.
Fraud.
Endangerment. Possibly more. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. What else? The money trail. Conrad pulled up a spreadsheet on his computer. I got friendly with a clerk at the county recorder's office. Thomas has been funneling money through shell companies to hide his income. He's underreporting to the IRS by at least $100,000 a year. That's tax fraud, Eleanor. Federal crime. But he wasn't done. Here's the part that's going to hurt. He pulled out a folder and opened it slowly, like he was giving me time to brace myself. Thomas has been draining Lorraine's accounts.
Systematically.
She had about $80,000 in savings when they got married. It's down to $14,000 now. I felt my chest tighten. Does she know? I doubt it. He's been doing it in small increments, 500 here, 1,000 there. Nothing big enough to trigger alerts. He transfers it to his shell accounts and uses it for his other girlfriends or to pay off business debts. Other girlfriends. Business debts. My daughter was being bled dry, and she had no idea. Can we prove it?
I asked.
Conrad smiled. Every transaction is documented. I've got bank records, transfer dates, amounts. A good lawyer could have him arrested by Friday. I sat back in the chair, letting it all sink in. We had everything. Every lie, every crime, every manipulation. Thomas Fairley had spent years building his house of cards, and now I held the match. What do you want to do?
Conrad asked.
I thought about it. I could go to the police right now, hand over everything and let the system handle it. But the system was slow, and Thomas was slippery. He'd hire lawyers, delay proceedings, maybe even flee.
No.
This needed to be surgical.
Precise.
Devastating. I want to hit him where it hurts most, I said. His reputation. His business. His freedom. Conrad nodded like he'd expected that answer. I've got a list of his current clients. 8 active jobs right now. Most of them don't know about his history because he keeps moving to new areas before word spreads. But if they knew what you know, they'd sue him, I finished. They'd sue him, report him, and destroy any credibility he has left. His business would collapse in days. I stared at the documents spread across Conrad's desk. Months of work. Thousands of dollars. All leading to this moment. Do it, I said. Contact every client, anonymously. Send them everything, the complaints, the violations, the proof. Let them make their own decisions. What about the authorities? We'll send them copies too. But the clients first. I want Thomas to wake up to a nightmare of his own making. Conrad started drafting anonymous emails that afternoon. Each one was personalized, addressed to specific clients with specific concerns about their projects. We included documentation, photographs, links to complaint sites. We made it impossible to ignore. By Thursday, we'd sent everything to all 8 clients, plus the local building department, the contractor licensing board, and the Better Business Bureau. Then we waited. The first response came Friday morning. A client named Janet Holloway, whose kitchen remodel was halfway done. She called the building department to request an inspection. When the inspector arrived, he found violations so severe he issued a stop work order on the spot. By Friday afternoon, 3 more clients had done the same. By Saturday, all 8 had contacted authorities. Thomas's phone must have been ringing off the hook. His business email must have been flooded. His carefully built facade was crumbling in real time. Conrad called me Saturday evening. It's working. The licensing board opened an investigation. 2 clients have already filed lawsuits. His business bank account was frozen this morning, probably to prevent him from moving money before legal action hits. I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was tired. Because this wasn't about winning, it was about balancing scales that had been tilted for too long. There's something else, Conrad said, his tone shifting. I have a contact at the bank where Thomas and Lorraine have their joint account. Your daughter tried to withdraw money yesterday. My stomach dropped. And there was almost nothing left. $14,000 in an account that should have had 10 times that. She called the bank, confused. They told her to check with her husband about the withdrawals. I closed my eyes. This was the moment. The moment when Lorraine would finally see what I'd seen all along. What did she do? Don't know yet. But based on the withdrawals Conrad documented, Thomas has been supporting 2 other women and covering business debts your daughter knows nothing about. When she figures that out, she'll break, I said quietly. And she would. Because the man she'd chosen over her own mother, the man she'd trusted with her future, was about to be exposed as exactly what I'd warned her he was: a liar, a thief, and a fraud. I sat in my apartment that night, watching the city lights flicker outside my window. Somewhere out there, Thomas was panicking. His phone was exploding. His business was collapsing. His lies were catching up to him faster than he could run. And Lorraine? She was finally waking up to the nightmare she'd married. Every lie leaves a footprint. We were just following his. Drop a comment if you think karma always finds its way, because this one's about to hit hard. The next chapter is where everything falls apart for Thomas. You won't want to miss it. The lawsuits hit like dominoes falling, one after another, faster than Thomas could keep up. By Monday morning, 4 separate clients had filed civil suits against Fairly Renovations for fraud, breach of contract, and negligence. By Wednesday, the state contractor licensing board suspended his license, pending a full investigation. Conrad kept me updated daily. His website's down, he reported Tuesday afternoon. Probably too many angry calls. His business voicemail is full. And get this, one of his suppliers put a lien on his equipment for unpaid invoices. Everything was unraveling exactly as I'd planned, but I felt no joy in it. Just a quiet satisfaction that justice was finally moving in the right direction. Then came Thursday. Conrad called me mid-morning, and I could hear something different in his voice. Eleanor, you need to sit down. I'm already sitting. Thomas cleared out his personal accounts yesterday. Everything. He liquidated what was left of the joint account with Lorraine, that $14,000, and withdrew cash from 3 different ATMs. Then he bought a one-way plane ticket to Costa Rica. My blood went cold. When? Flight leaves tonight at 8:40. He's running. Of course he was. Rats always flee sinking ships. But he wasn't just running from lawsuits. He was running from criminal charges, from angry clients, from everyone he'd betrayed, including my daughter. Does Lorraine know? I doubt it. According to my source, she tried calling him 17 times yesterday. He's not answering. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, feeling something I hadn't expected. Pity. Not for Thomas. He deserved everything coming to him. But for Lorraine. Because she was about to learn the hardest lesson of her life. There's more, Conrad continued. I sent an anonymous tip to the district attorney's office this morning with all our documentation. They're opening a criminal investigation for fraud and tax evasion. If Thomas leaves the country before they can arrest him, he becomes a fugitive. Good, I said. Let him run. Let him spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't enough. Because Thomas running away meant Lorraine was left holding the bag, liable for the business debts, responsible for the lawsuits, alone with the wreckage of a life he'd built on lies. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in 8 months. I drove to Lorraine's house. Not my old house, that had been sold and renovated and belonged to strangers now, but the house she and Thomas had bought with the profits from selling my home. A nice colonial in a good neighborhood, probably worth $500,000, built on my family's stolen legacy. I parked across the street and watched. The lights were on inside. Through the window, I could see Lorraine pacing back and forth, phone to her ear. Even from a distance, I could see her distress, the way she moved, frantic and desperate. She was trying to reach him, trying to understand why her accounts were empty, why clients were calling with legal threats, why her husband had suddenly become unreachable.
Part of me wanted to walk up to that door,
to tell her I'd been right all along, to make her face what she'd done by choosing him over me. But I didn't, because she was already facing it. And sometimes the cruelest thing you can do is let someone sit with the consequences of their choices. I drove home and waited. The call came Friday morning. Not from Lorraine, but from Conrad.
He's gone.
Thomas made his flight. He's in Costa Rica by now, probably already on a beach somewhere, thinking he's escaped. What about Lorraine? Conrad's silence said everything. She filed a police report this morning, he finally said. Reported him for theft, fraud, abandonment. Apparently, she went to the bank yesterday and discovered everything, the drained accounts, the shell companies, the debts. Then she went home and found half his stuff gone. He'd been planning this for weeks. I closed my eyes. My daughter, stubborn, proud, foolish Lorraine, had been betrayed by the man she chose over her own mother. Is she okay? I asked, hating how much I still cared. Physically?
Yeah.
Emotionally? That's a different story. She's facing lawsuits she can't pay for, debts she didn't know existed, and a criminal husband who fled the country. She's going to lose everything, Eleanor. The house, her savings, probably her reputation too. Everything. Just like he'd made me lose everything. The difference was I'd had no choice. Lorraine had chosen this. She'd chosen Thomas's lies over her mother's warnings. And now she was paying for it. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched from a distance as Lorraine's life imploded. Conrad kept me informed, not because I asked, but because he knew I needed to know. The house went into foreclosure. The lawsuits piled up. The media picked up the story. Local contractor flees country, leaves wife with millions in debt. Lorraine's face was plastered on local news sites, not as a victim, but as Thomas Fairley's accomplice. She tried to explain that she'd known nothing, that she'd been deceived just like everyone else. But nobody cared. In the court of public opinion, she was guilty by association. She had to sell everything: furniture, jewelry, her car. She moved into a small apartment, got a part-time job at a grocery store, and became exactly what she'd tried to protect herself from by marrying Thomas, alone and struggling. I could have felt vindicated. Could have said, "I told you so," from my safe little apartment in Westfield. Could have let her drown in the chaos he'd created. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Because this wasn't what I'd wanted. I'd wanted justice against Thomas, not the destruction of my daughter. Still, I didn't reach out. Not yet. Because Lorraine needed to sit with this. Needed to understand that choices have consequences, that loyalty matters, that you don't abandon your family for someone who's using you. 3 weeks after Thomas fled, I received something in the mail. A small envelope, addressed to Eleanor Parker at my Westfield address. How did she know where I was? How did she find me? I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single card, plain white, no decoration. Just 2 words written in Lorraine's handwriting. I'm sorry. I stared at those words for a long time. 2 words that didn't fix anything. 2 words that didn't erase the betrayal, the stolen house, the 8 months of hell. But they were something. A crack in the wall she'd built. An acknowledgement that she'd been wrong. I folded the card carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Then I sat down and wrote a letter of my own. Sometimes love blinds us. But truth? It always comes to light. If you've ever seen karma in action, share this video with someone who needs a reminder. Justice always finds its way home. Comment truth if you believe betrayal always comes back around. The next chapter is where Eleanor finally finds peace, and you won't believe how she does it. I didn't mail the letter right away. It sat on my kitchen table for 3 days while I decided what I really wanted to say. Because words matter, and I only had one chance to say this right. Finally, I wrote it out by hand on simple stationery, the kind Henry used to use for thank you notes to clients. Lorraine, I began. I received your card. 2 words after 8 months of silence. 2 words after you let a stranger sell the home your father built. 2 words after you chose his lies over my warnings. I want to say those 2 words don't matter, but that would be a lie. They do matter. Just not in the way you might think. I paused, pen hovering over paper, trying to find the right tone. Not angry, I was past anger. Not cruel, that wasn't who I was. Just honest. A home isn't built with wood and nails, Lorraine. It's built with trust, with loyalty, with the understanding that family stands together when the world tries to tear you apart. You forgot that. Or maybe Thomas made you forget. Either way, you sold more than a house. You sold us. I stopped writing and looked out my apartment window. Spring was coming, trees budding, flowers pushing through dirt, everything waking up from winter. Nature's way of proving that things could start over. I won't pretend I'm not angry, I continued. I won't pretend this didn't break something inside me that might never fully heal. But I also won't pretend I don't understand how you got here. Love makes us blind sometimes. Makes us believe lies because the truth is too painful. Makes us choose wrong because choosing right feels impossible. The next part was hardest to write. Thomas used you. He saw a lonely woman with resources, and he took advantage of that loneliness. He isolated you from me because I was the only person who could see through him. And when he'd taken everything he could, he ran. That's what predators do, honey. They consume, and then they move on. I could picture her reading this in whatever small apartment she'd ended up in, probably crying, probably hating herself. Part of me wanted to spare her that pain, but the bigger part knew she needed to hear it. You're facing consequences now that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Lawsuits, debt, public humiliation. You're learning what it feels like to lose everything because of someone else's choices. I know that feeling. You put me through that same hell 8 months ago. My hand was shaking as I wrote the final paragraph. I hope you learned something from this, Lorraine. I hope you learned that character matters more than charm. That your mother's warnings came from love, not jealousy. That you can't build a future on someone else's foundation of lies. I wish you peace, truly. But I've found mine elsewhere, and I'm not sure there's room for you in it anymore. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's the price of forgetting where you came from. You've paid it in full. Now you have to live with it. I signed it simply, Eleanor. Not Mom. Not Love. Just Eleanor. Because that's what I was now, a woman who'd been forced to rebuild herself from nothing, who'd learned to stand alone, who discovered that sometimes the best revenge is simply surviving while the people who hurt you destroy themselves. I mailed the letter the next morning. For weeks afterward, I heard nothing. No response, no call, no attempt to reach out. And that was fine. I'd said what I needed to say. Whether Lorraine heard it was up to her. Conrad wrapped up his investigation and closed my file. You did it, he said when I stopped by his office to settle the final bill. Thomas is gone. His business is destroyed. Your daughter knows the truth. That's about as complete as revenge gets. It's not revenge, I said quietly. It's justice. There's a difference. He smiled. Is there? Maybe he was right. Maybe justice and revenge were just different words for the same thing. But sitting there in his cluttered office, paying the last of his fees, I realized I didn't care anymore. Thomas was gone. Lorraine was broken. And I was free. Free from anger. Free from bitterness. Free from the need to keep fighting. I thanked Conrad, shook his hand, and walked out into spring sunshine that felt warmer than it had in years. The next step was simple. Move forward. Not back to my old life, that was gone forever, but towards something new, something that belonged to me alone. I started house hunting, not in the town where I'd lost everything, but farther out, rural Massachusetts, where land was cheap and neighbors were scarce. I wanted quiet. I wanted space. I wanted to build something small and simple that nobody could ever take from me. I found a property in late April, 2 acres with a rundown cottage that needed everything.
Perfect.
The previous owner had died, and his kids just wanted it gone. I paid cash, $35,000 for land and structure. It was mine. Completely, legally, undeniably mine. I hired contractors, carefully vetted ones who actually pulled permits and followed codes. I supervised every step of the renovation, making decisions based on what I wanted, not what someone else thought was best. The cottage came together slowly. New roof, new plumbing, fresh paint in colors I chose, soft blues and warm creams, nothing like the yellow kitchen I'd lost. I wanted this place to be different, a fresh start, not a recreation of the past. In June, I planted a rose bush outside the kitchen window. Not the same variety I'd had before, but a new breed, hardy, resistant, designed to survive harsh winters. Like me, I moved in on a Saturday in late July, carrying boxes of the few possessions I'd accumulated. No family photos, those belonged to a life I was leaving behind. No heirlooms, Thomas had sold those. Just books, clothes, kitchen supplies, and one framed photo of Henry that I kept on my nightstand. That first night in my new cottage, I sat on the small porch and watched the sun set over my 2 acres. Crickets chirped. A breeze rustled through trees I'd planted myself. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. It was quiet, peaceful, mine. For the first time in over a year, I felt like myself again. Not the broken woman who'd been thrown out of her own home. Not the angry victim plotting revenge. Just Eleanor, a woman who'd survived, rebuilt, and refused to let cruelty define her. My phone rang once that summer. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom, Lorraine's voice, small and hesitant. I hadn't heard it in months. I didn't hang up, but I didn't speak either. Just waited. I got your letter, she said. I deserved every word. I wanted you to know I'm trying to do better.
I got a job.
A real one. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm learning how to stand on my own. Still, I said nothing. I don't expect you to forgive me, she continued, her voice breaking. I don't even know if I deserve to ask. But I needed you to know that you were right. About everything. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The line went quiet except for her breathing. I'm glad you're getting help, I finally said. I hope you figure things out, Lorraine. I really do. Can we maybe talk sometime? When you're ready? I looked out at my rose bush, blooming bright red in the summer sun.
Strong.
Beautiful. Surviving. Maybe someday, I said. But not today. I hung up before she could respond. Because forgiveness wasn't something I owed her. Forgiveness was something she had to earn. And that would take time, years maybe. Or maybe it would never happen at all. Either way, I was okay. I'd built my peace without her, and I wasn't giving it up just because she finally woke up to reality. Sometimes, the people who hurt us want forgiveness more than we need to give it. And that's okay. They have to live with what they did. We just have to live with ourselves. And I could live with myself just fine. Comment justice if you believe peace can come after heartbreak. The final chapter is coming, and it's going to show you what real strength looks like. Stay with me. 2 years have passed since that October morning when I stood on my own porch and couldn't get in. 2 years since my daughter chose a con man over her mother. 2 years since I lost everything and had to rebuild from nothing. Today, I'm 77 years old, and I'm sitting on my own porch again, but this one is different. This porch belongs to a cottage I built with my own choices, on land nobody can take from me, surrounded by gardens I planted with my own hands. The rose bush outside my kitchen window is thriving. It survived 2 harsh winters and came back stronger each spring. I named it Henry because it reminds me that beautiful things can grow even after everything seems dead. Life is simple here. I wake with the sun, make coffee in my small kitchen, and spend my days reading, gardening, and enjoying the quiet. I volunteer at the local library twice a week, helping seniors learn to use computers. Ironic considering where I was 2 years ago. Dorothy visits once a month. We drink tea and laugh about getting old, about how life surprises you even when you think you've seen everything. She never mentions Lorraine unless I bring her up first, which I rarely do. Because here's the thing about moving on, you have to actually move. You can't keep looking back at the wreckage, or you'll never see the road ahead. I did hear about Thomas, though. Conrad sent me a newspaper clipping last year. Thomas Fairley was arrested in Costa Rica trying to scam a resort owner. He's sitting in a jail cell down there now, fighting extradition. By the time he gets back to the States, he'll face federal charges for fraud, tax evasion, and about a dozen civil lawsuits. He'll be an old man before he sees freedom again. I felt nothing when I read that article. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even pity. Just nothing. He'd become irrelevant to my story. A footnote in a chapter I'd already closed. Lorraine called me 3 times over the past 2 years. I answered once, listened to her updates, new job, new apartment, therapy progress, and wished her well before hanging up. The other 2 times I let it go to voicemail. She sends me cards on holidays. Short messages, never asking for anything, just letting me know she's thinking of me. I keep them in a drawer, but don't respond. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday I'll be ready to let her back into my life in some small way.
But not yet.
Because forgiveness isn't something you rush. It's something you grow into, like those roses outside my window. It takes time, patience, and the right conditions. Force it too soon, and it dies. Let it develop naturally, and it might bloom into something real. Last month, I did something I never thought I'd do. I drove past my old house. Not to torture myself, but because I was in the area visiting Dorothy, and I wanted to see if I could handle it. The young couple who bought it has done well. They painted it a different color, pale green instead of white, and added a swing set in the backyard. Through the window, I could see kids' artwork on the refrigerator. The maple trees Henry and I planted have grown tall enough to shade the whole yard now. It looked happy.
Lived in. Loved.
And I was okay with that. Because that house was never really about the structure. It was about what Henry and I built inside it. And nobody could take that away, no matter what they did with the deed. Those memories live in me now, not in walls and floorboards. They're portable.
Permanent. Mine.
I think that's what I've learned through all of this. Home isn't a place. It's a feeling. It's waking up and knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. It's having control over your own life. It's being surrounded by things you chose, not things someone else decided you deserved. I have that now. Finally. Some people might look at my life and see a tragedy, a woman who lost her home, her daughter, everything she'd built over 75 years. And yeah, that's part of the story. But it's not the whole story. Because I also found something in those ashes. I found strength I didn't know I had. I found the ability to start over at an age when most people are winding down. I found peace that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or presence. I found myself, and that, more than any revenge or justice or vindication, is what matters. Thomas took my house, but he couldn't take my spirit. Lorraine broke my heart, but she couldn't break my will. They thought I'd just fade away quietly, become another forgotten old lady nobody cared about. They were wrong. I'm still here, still standing, still building, just in a different way, in a different place, with different people who actually deserve to be in my life. Sometimes I think about Henry and wonder what he'd say about all this. Probably something simple, like, "You did good, Eleanor." Real good. He never needed a lot of words to make his point. I like to think he's proud of me. Proud that I didn't give up. Proud that I fought back without losing myself in the process. Proud that I remembered what he taught me, that the best things in life are built slowly, carefully, with your own 2 hands. The other day, a young woman stopped by my cottage. She'd gotten lost looking for a friend's house and needed directions. We got to talking and she mentioned she was going through a divorce. Her husband had been controlling, manipulative, slowly isolating her from family and friends. "I feel so stupid," she said, tears in her eyes. Everyone warned me about him, but I didn't listen. Now I've lost years of my life. I made her a cup of tea, and we sat on my porch. I told her my story, not all of it, but enough. About trusting the wrong person. About losing everything. About having to start over. "Does it get better?" she asked. I looked out at my rose bush, at my little cottage, at the life I'd built from nothing. "It gets different," I told her. "And if you're brave enough to do the work, different can be better. But you have to be willing to let go of who you were and become who you're meant to be." She left an hour later with a little more hope in her eyes. And I realized something. Maybe that's my purpose now. Not to dwell on what was taken from me, but to show others that you can survive the taking. That you can rebuild. That 75, or any age, isn't too old to start over. I've been thinking about writing my story down. All of it. Not for publication or fame, but just to have it documented. To prove to myself that it really happened, that I really survived, that the woman I was became the woman I am. Maybe I'll leave it for Lorraine someday. Not as punishment, but as testimony. This is what happened when you forgot where you came from. This is what it cost. This is how I survived anyway. Or maybe I'll just keep it for myself. A reminder on hard days that I've been through worse and made it out the other side. Last week, I got a letter. Not from Lorraine, from one of Thomas's former clients, a woman named Janet Holloway. She'd tracked me down through Conrad, who gave her my information with my permission. Dear Mrs. Whitford, she wrote, I don't know if you'll remember me, but I was one of the clients Thomas fairly defrauded. I wanted to thank you. The anonymous information we received about his illegal practices saved me from losing even more money. When I investigated further, I discovered it came from your private investigator. You could have just walked away after what he did to you, but instead you warned the rest of us. You saved my family from financial ruin. Thank you. I read that letter 3 times, and each time I felt something shift inside me. Because I'd spent 2 years thinking my revenge was about punishing Thomas and proving Lorraine wrong. But maybe it was bigger than that. Maybe by exposing him, I'd protected people I'd never met. Maybe my pain had prevented someone else's. Maybe that's what justice really is, not getting even, but making sure the cycle stops. I wrote Janet back, thanking her for reaching out. We've exchanged a few letters since then. She invited me to visit her family sometime. I might take her up on that. Because that's another thing I've learned. New connections matter just as much as old ones. Maybe more, because they're built on who you are now, not who you used to be. Tomorrow is my 78th birthday. I'll spend it alone, by choice. I'll make Henry's favorite chocolate cake, just a small one, because it's just me. I'll sit on my porch and watch the sunset. I'll read a book Dorothy recommended. I'll water my roses and check on the vegetable garden I started last month. It won't be dramatic or exciting or anything worth writing home about. But it'll be peaceful. It'll be mine. And that's enough. People ask me sometimes if I regret anything. If I wish I'd fought harder to keep Lorraine from Thomas, or if I wish I'd never transferred that deed, or if I wish Henry were still here to help me through it all. The truth? I regret nothing. Because regret implies I had control over other people's choices, and I didn't. Thomas was always going to be a predator. Lorraine was always going to make her own mistakes. Henry was always going to die too soon. The only thing I could control was how I responded. And I chose to survive. I chose to fight back, not with violence or cruelty, but with patience and precision. I chose to rebuild instead of staying buried in the rubble. And I'd make those same choices again in a heartbeat. The sun is setting now over my 2 acres. The sky is streaked with pink and orange, and fireflies are starting to appear in the tall grass. Somewhere in the distance, I can hear a train whistle, lonely and beautiful at the same time. I take a sip of my tea and breathe in the evening air. It smells like summer and possibility and peace. This is my revenge. This quiet evening. This simple life. This proof that they couldn't break me, couldn't erase me, couldn't make me disappear. I'm still here. Still Eleanor. Still standing. And I'll be here tomorrow too, and the day after that, and every day that follows. Not because I have to prove anything to anyone, but because I finally understand what Henry meant when he said houses are built from moments. I'm building new moments now. Good ones. Peaceful ones. Moments that belong only to me. That's the real justice. Not in watching Thomas rot in a jail cell or seeing Lorraine struggle with consequences. The real justice is in this. I rebuilt my peace while they drowned in the chaos they created. They thought they won when they changed those locks. They thought my story ended that October morning. They were wrong. That's where my real story began. And this quiet cottage, this blooming garden, this hard-earned peace, this is how it continues. Not with thunder or fanfare, but with a woman on her porch at sunset, finally home in a way that has nothing to do with addresses or deeds. Home in herself. Home in her choices. Home in a life nobody can steal because she built it from nothing and protected it with everything she had. That's the quiet justice of a woman who refused to be erased. And that, dear listeners, is the best revenge there is. If this story moved you, don't scroll away. Hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to start over. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we have more stories like this coming that will remind you. Strength isn't about being loud, it's about refusing to stay down. Drop a comment telling me what you learned from Eleanor's journey. Your words might inspire someone else who's fighting their own battle right now. And remember, justice doesn't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be broken. Thank you for being part of this family. I'll see you in the next story.